Welcome back to Learning Matters. I'm Doug Wooltridge, your host. Happy holidays, folks. Today, we're going to take a look back at our first year of podcasting. And before we get to the first clip, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of our wonderful guests this year. It's been incredible to hear your stories and to discuss the future of learning and development. So, for our first clip, this is from episode 2, Secrets to Securing Repeat Business with Customer Loyalty, with ttcInnovations founder and CEO Debbie Wooltridge. She's going to be discussing how being the most authentic version of yourself is really one of the ways that leads you to success as an entrepreneur. Let's take a listen. Just to take this to kind of more of a philosophical side of things, I know a lot of listeners are going to hear this story and think, how can I find success like this in my company or endeavor? Or maybe it seems impossible to figure out where even to start. So when it comes to either creating your own business or maybe just finding success and joy and passion within your own career, do you have any advice for our listeners? Any words of wisdom to pass on to the folks listening?
I don't know how many words of wisdom there are, but I'll tell you what my strategy was. And this was, and honestly, in every job that I had building myself up to this company, the one thing that I knew I needed for me was to be authentically me. I couldn't be this person I couldn't act the part of. Mm-hmm. That's just not who I am. And the other thing that I knew that I hold true still today is I have to look at myself in the mirror every single day and think, did I do the right thing for the people that I work with, for my clients, and for myself? I have to live with myself. And for me, that means integrity has been that linchpin. It's the thing that drives me. It doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes, and it doesn't mean that I don't make a wrong choice, because I do. I've made plenty of wrong decisions and you know, produced something that I wasn't proud of because I didn't either ask the right questions or I didn't have the right skill set, the right knowledge. And I've always believed it's how you recover from your errors that really tells the client what kind of company you are. And I do believe that we have always been that company, and a part of that partnership is to say, you know what, we didn't do you right there, and we're going to fix this. Please give us a chance to take this and repair it and make it better. And if you don't have time for us to fix this, we'd love for you to give us a chance, and here's what we're going to do different next time. And I do think that if we were perfect all the time, I think clients wouldn't feel that relationship with us because I think they learn more about you when you do fail. I think they see more of who you really are when you fail, because it's easy to come out of the gate, do something great, and walk away. And people are like, "Oh, that was amazing." But, you know, over 20 plus years, when you build those relationships with clients, not everything's going to be amazing or perfect out of the gate. And it's how you recover that tells them what kind of relationship you are with them, what kind of partner you are with them.
Our next clip is from episode 3, Cultivating Empathy, the Art of AI Storytelling and Learning, with Eric Burgett, our creative solutions lead. He's going to be sharing his belief that the tools that you use should never stand out over the impact of storytelling when developing in-depth training solutions. When you started utilizing Midjourney and building these courses out, what were your clients saying to the actual results of these? Were they blown away? Were they taken aback by kind of the difference in how maybe they have used storytelling in the past, or maybe just how they use training in the past?
Yeah, I think for me, success is with these tools is if they're invisible. And that goes for any tool. Like, I don't want, well, my initial desire wouldn't be for a client to say, like, I really love how you used Photoshop here and here. I just think,
right,
like, if you see Photoshop, then that's getting in the way. It's like one step removed from the story itself. So, you know, I feel that sense of gratification or like a job well done if somebody just really feels like, oh, I just, I really enjoyed that, the way you kind of told that story or showed that. And so I think in terms of Midjourney, I don't even want to say what is or isn't Midjourney. Do you know what I mean? I want that to be, sometimes it's hard to even say, like, I took a piece of it here, but then I combined it. And I mean, honestly, I should really emphasize, like, the power of Photoshop right now is very significant. And it's hard because I don't want to discourage, if there's an instructional designer that doesn't have a skill set in Photoshop,
right.
I don't want to say, well, it's, shoot, I can't really take advantage of this new creative era or think like, I think there is, certainly I think there's something to be played with there to figure out, okay, where does this work into my workflow as maybe you're more on the front end of like instructional design, and not so much on the image creation end. I think there's still opportunities there, but I think understanding Photoshop to the degree that you can cut out like just basic Photoshop, not like, all of the things with all of the options, but just enough. And not even to say, there might be other like Canva or like other more accessible programs that can do the same functionality. But the ability to cut something out, and take pieces of something that you generate in Midjourney is something to pursue. I think that will allow you to use these technologies like more immediately. Whereas there might be kind of softwares that are built out in the next few years that allow kind of, non-Photoshop users to do that in a way that's efficient as well.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, a part of what makes this industry so exciting to folks getting into it is that instructional designers or learning experience design, you're not really a subject matter expert for one thing. You are an expert on building something that is going to be impactful for whoever the learner is going to be. And so you are constantly given the opportunity to learn about new things every single day. So whether that's new technologies just to make it a better learning experience for folks, or whether that's just about, in these instances, learning what it is like for folks who are dealing with potential tornado in a small town, and how to effectively do their job when those disasters and those type of things happen. So just as an aside, what do you think these type of tools are going to do to the Gettys and the Shutterstocks of the world?
It's really interesting. I've noticed that like Adobe Stock has now sort of not partnered. They've incorporated Firefly, into their product suite. And so it's, I think there is a realization that this is kind of the new stock for a lot of things.
Right.
It'll be interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's bad news for them. I think they're trying to understand like where do they fit in terms of curating and creating a place where this is easily accessible for stock where you can grab, because all of a sudden now even with Adobe specifically, the quality of stock, their libraries are probably just going as people are submitting generated images, and so the quality of their stock content is going up. And so I just think that, when I first started 12 years ago, even comparing that to now, the quality of stock photography has gone up so much, which has just made for better, like less robotic training visuals in general, where they're there with personality that you can find, that doesn't just sort of scream like, oh, this is a stock photo of a business person doing business. And like, they come along.
My favorite.
It's still there, right? But whenever you find, like, you go to Unsplash and you're like, oh, finally, like real photography,
Right.
And you can find that if you spend enough time searching within Shutterstock or Adobe and things. But, I think combining Midjourney into these tools, if they're able to curate that well, I think it's just going to lead to better products in L&D down the road in general. So
Mallory Steele joins us in episode 5, Amplifying Black Voices in L&D, Finding Community and Work-Life Balance. And in this segment, she discusses how she's able to find that work-life balance and keep motivated. What do you do to get away from the craziness of work? So is there any advice that you can give to our listeners on how to keep a balance, try to keep a balance of that personal time and that work time when you're trying to run a business, when you're trying to schedule these events and do all these massive things?
So I'll say I think I have very good boundaries because I only have a certain amount of energy and then I'm done.
Love it. Yes.
Yeah, I only have a certain amount where I'm creative and I'm excited and I enjoy it. And then when it's gone, like you can't fake it, you can't force it. And so I'm like, I'll just be done and I'll go for a walk or I'll do whatever. Where I struggle is that, and I think a lot of moms feel this way, and there's a term for it I saw on TikTok last year, where you just kind of like, it's not doom scrolling, but it's something scrolling where you're just there. You're not you're
passively looking at things,
really
like you're kind of bringing
really
it into your mind and stuff, but you're just like going through the motions.
Yes. And so where I struggle is that as far as like, I can have the boundaries. Work is not an issue. I can stop work and I'll get to this later. I'm one of those people I can get back online late at night if I need to give myself a break, or I can wake up early. So I don't have any issues with like balancing the boundaries of work. When I take the time away, it's like to do things that's actually mentally, emotionally, physically healthy versus like, I just want to lay here. Yeah, I just want to do nothing. And I think as a mom, like we wouldn't tell our kids that. It's like, okay, go get up, do something, be productive, go outside, go to the park. But I'm like, I'm not doing that. I just want to do nothing. I want to hear nothing. I want to see nothing, do nothing. And so that's where I'm like, I want to get back, especially in the winter, Doug. Oh my gosh, don't ask me to go anywhere. So I want to do better at saying, okay, I am having this time to myself. I have the balance, but what am I actually doing with it? And, listen, you guys tell me your tips. I was like, these are the things I would love to say. Oh, I'm going to take a pottery class. But the idea of committing myself to these things on a day that I'm like, I actually don't want to do. I don't want to drive anywhere. Right? I just want to cuddle up in a blanket with a little space here and watch Netflix. So, but also I think that's okay too. So I've given myself permission in this season to say, that's fine. Like if I want to do absolutely nothing, then I'm going to do absolutely nothing.
Exactly. And I think that's so important to be true to your actual feelings, what you want to do, and do what you want to do. And that way, when you get back into the work, you do feel refreshed. You feel like, all right, I had my time to relax and wind. Now I can get back to the craziness that is life. In this clip from episode 7, Staying Competitive and Innovative, Tips for Senior Instructional Designers, Dr. Robin Sargent, CEO and founder of Idle Courses, gives us her insight on the future of L&D. In the evolving landscape of digital learning, how do you envision the future of instructional design and online education?
I mean, I'm excited about the future. I see more and more tech and tools, and I talk about things like inclusivity, accessibility, and my personal favorite, which is personalized learning. I mean, we already, in so many ways, if we just look at the ways that me as a learner, right? I know I'm not my learners, but I, of course, pay attention to my own way of learning. And if I want to go and learn a thing, it's always very specific, right? If I want to fix a toilet in my house, then I go to YouTube, and I don't just search like how to install a toilet. I search for like the bobber in the toilet, how to fix the bobber in the toilet. And it's very specific. And then I pull up a video, and then it has timestamps, and I'm only going to this timestamp where they actually get to the bobber and they fix the bobber. in the toilet. And it's the same kind of thing that I see us moving to, as far as I see things like social learning networks, right? Knowledge bases that pull up personalized learning, giving people free navigation in their training libraries, and even the AI bots that I have one even in our academy that has taken all of the content that we've put into our school and added it to its knowledge base, so you can now ask a little bot in our school, what's this and this about analysis or whatever it is, and it is pulling from our own course materials, and then I can either click on the lesson or I can just take that answer and be like, okay, good, got what I wanted.
That's incredible.
Moving on. And so I just see more and more of that happening.
I guess just to piggyback on that, Debbie, would love to know your perspective on AI as well, like how it's being used within learning and development, and maybe where that's going as well.
It's interesting. We teach how to use AI. Even built my students their own custom bot that's based on the first principles of instruction, and it helps them brainstorm how to write problem-centered scenarios for their course blueprints and things like that. So AI is certainly a part of our program. But beyond that, I see AI, of course, helping us do the things which is the hardest thing, I think, and it used to be the hardest thing for me too, right? Was to be the initial creative spark. We would stare at blank pages and we would have to produce. You couldn't rely on your SME to write things for you or any of that kind of stuff. And so we had to be the ones that just generated, right? Just generated the ideas. What's cool now is that ChatGPT can do a lot of brainstorming work for you so that you can use that mental energy to do the deep thinking, right? And do some of those more creative processes that take a longer amount of time. The time that you get back from being able to brainstorm the ideas with AI. But what's also interesting is, like, I also run Idle Town, right, which is a staffing agency that we only place graduates from our school on these contracts. But I bring it up because those bigger clients do not want any part of AI used to generate their training content.
Interesting.
Right? Because because they don't want the information about their certification for their big software programs to be put into to be training the models. And so I think it's an interesting place where we are, where people are, on one hand, the clients are concerned about their proprietary information getting fed into this, language model. And then the other side is the instructional designers are like, this is great because I can use it for brainstorming. I can use it for outlining, and even the little bot that I built, right? To help you write scenarios. So I think we're at an interesting thing. I have recently discovered something very cool. I think is going to be useful for with AI in education, and that is a lot of times we want to ask our learners open-ended questions. But how do you ask open-ended questions, get learner responses, and give them feedback when it's open-ended in a digital course, right? And so what's cool is there are so many capabilities. Like, for instance, you can actually program AI to read these open-ended answers, give it the rubric that you want in order to give feedback for these open-ended questions, whether they're reflective or, formative or even summative. I mean, I guess it just depends on how you feel about getting AI generated feedback. But it's pretty cool what you can do with these things that you could never do before. It used to have to require a human resource in order to give feedback on every single open-ended response, and we don't necessarily need that for everything anymore.
Right, or have the time to do that.
Yeah, or the resources, the budget. I mean,
exactly.
Every single faculty, the biggest cost in my school is faculty.
Mm-hmm. Piggybacking on that last clip, we have Vanessa Alzate from episode 12, How TikTok Has Changed the Way We Learn, discussing her vision of the future for our industry and how AI isn't the end-all, be-all thing that's going to fix all of our problems. Here, what do you see as the future for L&D in terms of integrating social media and short-form content? So are there any emerging trends that we haven't talked about that we should kind of keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think right now people are really obsessed with AI. So I think it's overshadowed like everything else, which is a shame because everything else is kind of what you might actually need and not AI, right? That's still kind of too new. Doesn't mean you shouldn't play with it. I love to play with it. And ChatGPT are pretty friendly. But I think there's just a matter of, for me, it's like, we've got to stop. AI is not going to solve our problems, right? Really good sound content will always win over AI. Now, if we stop and look around, what are people paying attention to and how are they living their lives and how can we integrate learning into the business and into their flow of work? That is what we need to be doing. Adding more content that they have to stop and participate in, we're never going to win that, right? That's not going to be a sustainable future. Finding performance support and helping people pull the content when they need it is really, truly what people need. And then I would also say an emerging trend, not TikTok related, but I truly believe in the power of community, is curating really good in-person experiences where people are really able to connect. People are craving connection now. So online communities are growing rapidly because people want to connect with others in a world in which we disconnected for so long. So I think that there is, we just hosted for Kirkpatrick our own summit last week. People didn't want to leave on the last day. They stayed around. They were helping us clean up. We were all dancing to Whitney Houston at the very end, just like making connection. That is what people want, right? And these are people that didn't know each other. Most of them were government and military. You want to talk about the most buttoned up people, or we perceive as the most buttoned up people. They're sitting there dancing and, jamming and just having connection with others. And they were like, this is what we needed. We needed this ability to meet, network, idea share, and just build that community. So I think that is the direction that we need to be shifting more into. But we stop because we fear all of the work behind building a community, right? And we're too bogged down in all of we've got to update this onboarding program. We've got to update this process, or we've got to update this. Maybe the solution is to stop it, build a community, and then take some of that stuff and put it into this community. And that's where your social media can start to get built in, right? Carousel posts, TikTok videos, static posts. That's where you can start to really build those and nurture those relationships.
Next up, we've got Nicole Papiano-Lugara, CEO of Your Instructional Designer, discussing a very cool new concept for L&D, social learning networks. This is from episode 14, Creating Scalable Social Learning Solutions for Corporate Training. Can you tell me a little bit about the difference between the digital cohort side of things and then the social learning network, or do they kind of combine together?
Yeah, so I like to look at our services as like a funnel in some ways,
Nice.
not like a marketing funnel, but So I think, we do a lot of microlearning still. And so those pathways end up being kind of the bottom, that's one piece. Then you move up a little bit more and you've got sort of these blended learning experiences. And that might be, again, more of a pathway with a lot of things embedded. The digital cohort is really just that plus community. And so you're adding community, curation, all of that. And then a social learning network could just be the thing that is then wrapping all of that plus kind of your holistic learning and development strategy. It might be the place you're communicating things in addition to the training. And so they can all play together. You might decide within your social learning network, you need to be running a cohort, and the community for that cohort and the resources need to live in your social learning network. And so they're kind of just, I would say, layers or levels of L&D at that point. Like one is a big solution, holistic solution. One is a programmatic solution. And then the micro learning could be a number of things, but it's usually like a really targeted training need.
I think it's brilliant. I think having that structure makes it much easier for folks that are coming and be like, I don't exactly know what I want, but I know where we need to start here. And then we can just kind of grow from there. And having those growth opportunities for them seems to be incredible. The following clip is from episode 17. What is XR and how does it benefit employee training? Where XR training lead Brian Melvin walks us through the differences between AR and VR and how those differences can be useful for varying training solutions and audiences. And can we dig in just a little bit about the differences between AR and VR, and not necessarily like the tech and the hardware side of things, but how learners react to the different types of mediums?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start with VR, and I will talk a little about the hardware.
Sure.
So virtual reality, you put on a headset, and you're fully immersed in some virtual world. So you're no longer seeing the room you're in. Instead, you're now in whatever simulation or game or entertainment experience that you're trying to be in. That's a great way to try different environments and see different things that maybe you don't have access to in real life. Many of the early headsets you see here, this is the Oculus Quest. Now, it doesn't have any lenses in the front. There are some small cameras that help you set up your boundary, but for the most part, you're totally immersed in that virtual world. So that's virtual reality. Augmented reality allows you to see the room that you're in, the environment that you're in, but you're seeing digital objects through a webcam or a pair of glasses or a smartphone or a tablet. So that makes it great to show the context, to show the room you're in, but see all this digital objects around as well to give context and explanation to whatever it is you're learning. So as far as the learner perspective, VR is great for training. It's fantastic to develop a simulation for an elevator technician to practice how to troubleshoot an elevator. So that's great with VR. With AR, it's great not just for learning, but actually when you're actually doing the work. When you want to repair something and you come up upon that whatever component you're looking at, and you open up your phone, and all of a sudden you can see a 3D model. You can pull up documents, and have that all right. So
that's really awesome.
Reality. Or there's another term, mixed reality. These worlds, virtual reality and augmented reality, are starting to blend, and now you've got all the newer headsets. That have some type of lenses. So this is the Quest Pro from Meta. You have the Quest 3. It's got 3 slits in it where the cameras and sensors are. But here you can see virtually and totally obscure the real environment, or you can start to see the room you're in and still see these 3D objects in that room. So it's kind of a blending of the two. So that's mixed reality. And so it's a great, then there's a term extended reality that just encompasses all of that. So my title is XR training lead at the company I work for. XR is just a term, extended reality, where the X replaces the V, the A, or the M in virtual augmented mixed reality.
Now we've got Nicole Whitney, Director of Talent for TTC Innovations, and this is from episode 6, How to Recruit, Hire, and Retain Top L&D Talent. Here she discusses how she refreshes herself mentally during a day full of interviews. How do you stay motivated? So it's not easy talking to new folks day in and day out, and it's not like you're just having a conversation about the weather or what your kids are doing or what you just read on Facebook. Job interviews are stressful on both sides. So is there anything that you do in between interviews to really refresh yourself, get back to that baseline?
Yeah,
I try not to do too many back to back to back. It's inevitable that it'll happen though. And I usually either just need a snack or to step outside for a moment and I can kind of refresh. But my biggest piece of advice is to be prepared. So, do the research ahead of time, the day before if you need to, look through resumes, applications, have your scorecards ready to go. When I'm behind the 8 ball or a last minute conversation pops up on my calendar that I don't have proper time to prep for, is when I get just frazzled. That by the end of the day, I am just fried. And so, I think, but what truly keeps me motivated is that, at the end of my workday, I've got 2 toddlers who I'm picking up with, and it just, the roles shift. It's never for very long, and then I'm on to the next thing, and trying to be present in the moment. So I take that, very similar to how I do interviews. I like to be very present. I'm not, multitasking while I'm doing interviews or anything like that. My sole focus is that, and then I'm moving on to the next thing. So I'll take a day of interviews over a day of admin any day of the week. So I find a lot of joy in those conversations.
Oh, that's awesome. In episode 22, Fractional Consulting Experts, Extended Reality and Utilizing Data, Terrell Pearson gives us his thoughts on where the industry is headed and how AI can help save time for designers and developers. You've been really on the vanguard of a lot of the technical and from software and hardware advances within this industry. Where do you think we're headed in the next couple of years?
Especially, going back to our the topic of AI, I think it will have a big impact on the industry, but maybe not so much in the way that a lot of people fear. I think there's a lot of fear that, AI can do this and that and can replace your jobs. And there's a lot of technology that's being introduced that, admittedly they do market themselves that way, right? One click and you're going to create your learning. And I think the reality is, like so many things in the past, that it will very much change the exact process that we use, and it will make certain parts of it take less of our time. You talked about subject matter experts. One of the difficult parts of the learning industry is always that since I'm not an expert, I rely on somebody, which means I rely on their time. And often from the client standpoint, they don't want to have to sacrifice all that time because their subject matter experts are also people they need doing the work, right? So if using AI really allows us the ability to get much further into the process, to have better developed storyboards and scripts and things like this that we can then take to those experts more fully realize and require less of their time to validate. So that's a huge part of it. If you just think about the amount of time, we actually did some experimentation with a partner company of ours, and we really just ran the standard kind of ADDIE, development process that you hear about a lot. But we introduced AI where we thought it could save some time, especially in the design process and the storyboarding process. And we're really able to determine that, based on comparing it to kind of the standard time to develop, instructor-led PowerPoint training type of things, it saved about 41% of the time.
Wow, that's incredible. That's significant.
It's a big deal, right? That's less a burden on the subject matter expert, but it also ultimately it's cost saving because you're spending less time developing everything, less instructional design hours, which is allows you to keep your costs down. And the benefit to companies like mine is that I'm not sacrificing the margin and so forth. I'm just being more efficient with my time, right? So everybody's kind of happy in the end. Client saves money, right? Because they're spending less. They don't have to pay for as many hours. But I'm not losing money hand over fist either because I'm able to actually still be profitable from the standpoint and be able to provide really good quality training on top of it, right? Because the focus then becomes not spending hours and hours reading manuals to figure out what's important to put into training, but instead thinking about, okay, well, how do I make that even more engaging? What else could I do to make that more engaging, right?
Next, Margarita Neme, a senior instructional designer for ttcInnovations, joins us for episode 21, Tips from a Senior ID, SME Selection, Engaging Learners, and the Future of L&D. And in this segment, she discusses what success means to her when a custom training solution goes live. When you are able to get into those later phases of the ADDIE model, the implementation and the evaluation, what are you looking for when it comes to success for the end portion of a project? I'd imagine it varies from client to client as well as from project to project, but are there benchmarks that you shoot for that allow you to see what success means and that you can take back to the client once everything's been wrapped up and you're able to showcase, okay, well, we started here and this is where we got to at the end of this training?
Yeah, 100%. And you're not alone. We don't often get to do that. And, the reality of things is usually, we need this yesterday and let's go. And you don't even get a chance to implement because you're on to the next big project. But you're absolutely right. So when we look at implementation and evaluation, we really, and it varies greatly by project and by client. But in general, I'm looking for a few key things. So first, I want to see that the training is actually being used and it's resonating with the learners. Is there a way for us to see if they're engaged? So through, maybe interviews or just going around and asking, are they applying what they've learned on the job?
Sure.
So I won't get into, Kirkpatrick's levels of evaluation. That's technical, but we'll keep it, I'm big on feedback. So from a learners and stakeholders perspective, what are we hearing? Are we hearing that the training is making a difference? Are there any areas that need tweaking? And I'm so interested in XAPI, and I know not many, and that's probably a different day, different conversation. But that's an area that fascinates me. Like, how are they engaging with your content pieces, and that whole reporting mechanism? And
hopefully someday.
Not many companies are playing in that arena yet, but it's really fascinating. Yes, the data you can pull from that. But lastly, to touch on the clear benchmarks, I try to, depending on the client and the project, I try to bring those up very early on, even in that analysis phase, right? What are you trying to achieve? This is when we can touch on things like specific performance improvements or, business outcomes they're hoping to see. So that's going to give us a good sense of whether the training is hitting the mark. So really getting a mix of both, qualitative and quantitative measures that guides you in the determining what success looks like.
For this clip from episode 13, Measuring Corporate Training Effectiveness and Fostering Employee Knowledge, Megan Gutierrez, founder of Taproot Learning Connections, discusses Taproot's mission statement about the importance of DEI and how that drives her in life and work. I also really love that when I was doing a little bit of research for this podcast, that the focal point of your commitment and your mission statement is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think that a lot of the Fortune 500 companies, while they are doing decent at finally really embracing this idea of DEI, I think that they still have a long way to go. So why is diversity, equity, and inclusion so important to your mission statement, as well as just how your company develops training, even if it's, like you said earlier, down to that the compliance side of things where it's not necessarily so fun to go through, but how do you embrace DEI as a company and make sure that is a massive part of not only just the way that you develop training, but also the way that you run the company?
I think it goes back to my roots in wanting to go into social work and having a strong drive towards being a very human-centric and a very people-centric company, and understanding that at the root of every training is people. Yep. Whether it be a compliance training or a safety training or anything, it's the learner at the end of the day is the person taking it. Mm-hmm. So understanding that that unique individual is going to be impacted at the end of the day, and making sure that you're constantly aware of, the diversity and the equity, that equality that comes with that is critical, and having that representation is important. And of course, as a woman and a minority in that respect, I also identify in the queer community, which brings a level to it. And then recently, and I wanted to bring this up, I found this incredible inclusivity pledge, and I'll give credit where credit's due. And she's created in the L&D community called Ideal. And I want to start using that more in its inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, and then love, which I love.
Yeah, that's great.
Because and it's bringing all of those things together. And it's Kayleen, and it's through. I'll make sure to get the information over to you.
Yeah, I'd love to add it into our show notes and such, because I think this is such an important side of training and also just life in general.
Yes. So it's through Scissortail Creative Services is part of where it comes from. And it was actually a member of my team who found it. And she went through some courses and then she brought it to me. And I love it. So, and that's also goes back to, we foster that on our team in our hiring practices, and my team knows that, like, hey, this is really important to us across the board, that we always want inclusivity in everything that we do, and that's important in our designs, in how we work with our clients, and we try to push our clients with it a little bit, which is sometimes hard because they're not always there. But we always try to say, okay, well, what can we do? What's our 10% that we can bring to the table? And how can we kind of push them to the 10%? And one of our recent clients, we were able to, almost every course, we were able to have scenarios that had characters with gender pronouns that were they, them, which was fantastic. And they were open to it. And, those kind of things, we're always trying to just be more inclusive in everything that we do, and help our clients there as well when they're open to it, even if they don't know what we're doing. Sometimes we just kind of try to get them there. So it's everything we do, we try to do it that way.
Dr. Lena Schlachta joins us for episode 27 to discuss her book, Measurement and Evaluation on a Shoestring. For this segment, we discuss her top strategies for building relationships with stakeholders. Building stockholder relationships is often very tough, maybe the toughest portion of the job when it comes to learning and development. What would be your top strategies for securing stakeholder buy-in?
A couple of things. So one is immediate, and the other takes time, but is an ongoing effort. So the immediate thing that I recommend, and we've probably heard this from other people, is what I think of as a return on expectations. The challenge is sometimes our stakeholders' expectations aren't in alignment with good learning science or even good data practices. And yet...
No fault of theirs.
Yeah. And yet, those expectations, maybe we don't understand why they have them because we don't have the perspective that they do. And that's okay. There's a gap, and we want to work to close that. But again, the authenticity and curiosity in approaching stakeholders is really helpful. But returning the expectations of our stakeholders, and that's not just the C-suite, it's anyone that is asking for our services. What are they expecting? And sometimes that, in a good learning science approach, we get to the root cause of the problem and make sure that a learning solution is really going to solve for that. And we push back if it's not a learning solution that is the right solution. But sometimes we are operating in less than ideal dynamics, and everyone's had a story where somebody asks for training and they want it done this way and they will not budge. So what are their expectations, and what's the thing that's most important to them, and how can we try and figure out a way to return those expectations while still delivering on good learning science to the best of our ability? And then those expectations can become a conversation point, and we can give the data back to our CEO or our operations manager, whoever, help them to see that we are capable of delivering on expectations and other things. And I think that's our low-hanging fruit, is just to have conversations about, what are you really needing through this intervention? And what do you expect will happen when it's over? And do we understand why those expectations are present? And, again, curiosity, authenticity, and then giving the data back as the program is rolling out to demonstrate that we are returning on those expectations and we are supporting the core need that they had. So that's the low-hanging fruit approach, and will over time compound and we'll build trust and rapport in ways that are really important for us. The other thing that I don't think we do often enough, though others are talking about it, is to build business acumen. That it is essential for us to understand, well, how does our business make money, and who are the competitors, and what do our shareholders and our boards, what do they care about? And how can we keep a pulse on that? And it's not a one and done. It's not like you can get that information one time and then never have to evaluate it again. I think it's something we should build a habit of on a quarterly basis, go do an exploration and make sure that we've got a finger on the pulse of what's really important to the organization right now. And make sure then that we're trying to do what we can to align our learning activities with those important priorities, such that we can try to prove that we're not just a cost center, that we are actually something that is a worthy investment in contributing to what the organization cares about the most. And we've got to do that work. No one's going to do it for us.
I was joined by TTC's Creative Solutions Lead, Eric Burgett, and Rose Benedict's VP of Operations for TTC Innovations to discuss how serious games is changing the way that learners interact and engage with training solutions. Let's take a listen. Yeah, I think you're probably right. Do you guys see this as the future of L&D, where you have serious games blended with more standard style of learning, so that, like you said, you're able to get those memory hooks and then also have that directly have people remember, oh yes, and then that was directly related to this other packet of information that I would normally just kind of read through and go through and then just in one ear out the other type of thing?
Yeah, this is an interesting question because it's a really big question. It's got a really big answer because there's so many things that touch it, right? So the future of L&D, I think in my humble little world, I believe it's going to be about experiences. It's going to be about experiences. And so serious games becomes one tool in the tool belt to address that, but it isn't the end all be all, right? I think we have to be aware in our industry, we're really good about going, oh yeah, the latest, greatest thing, that's the future of L&D, but flip that and say, no, it's these things that are more experiential. And that has such broad reaching implications because L&D is going to have to start, it's got an onus to help bridge the gap between traditional education and career and professional development. And we're seeing as generations go on, those gaps change and they morph, and that all has an impact on what the future of L&D is going to look like. But I do think if you look at everything that's happening in the world today, it's going to be about experiences. How do you get people to have lived something, realize something, to internalize it, to actualize them? And I think that is absolutely where the future is going.
And with that in mind, what do you think the overall impact is for a learner that's going through these type of experiences? And also, what type of are we able to get new and different types of data to come in from these experiences?
In terms of experiences, I think it's broader than, like you said, it's broader than simply the serious games. That's kind of one tool. I think I read something recently that was interesting, like looking at these learning experiences on a spectrum of play. And so if you think of, the beneficial activity, learning activity of play, it is that is a state of mind and being that is really conducive to growth and learning is when you're in that state. So when you're on the spectrum of like openness of like literal, just kind of, there aren't any rules. It's just freedom of movement, freedom of agency and decision. It's a very high state of choice for the individual. So, thinking of a child at play in the backyard, just open to choices and high engagement, high enjoyment, but not really a structured scaffolding of like what is the actual learning in that situation. Thinking in terms of like L&D, we have self-directed or explore topics that you're interested in that are in your kind of career field. Wide open sense of play, follow your heart kind of invitation, very impactful. But if you're a manager trying to kind of steer certain skills, or you cultivate certain kind of narrow skill sets that you want to help them learn in, then you need to put something that's a little bit more rules in place. And so down the spectrum, you have serious games, which might be a structured set of objectives that you've mapped out, for the game. But agency is still key in these serious games. And so in this learning experience, if we can cultivate that feeling of agency, of trying to make choices to overcome the challenge, the obstacles that are in this little learning experience, there's a sense of satisfaction and enjoyment in that process. But like Rose said, it's a part of the collective. You need to move down the spectrum too and have things that have less agency, but are more prescriptive. Like, hey, we need you to know what the protocol is for file uploads on our file management system. It might be less engaging and enjoyable, but necessary in the broad scheme of activities. We need to be thorough with our information. But to draw that back to the question of like, what is the future? Like, what is the vision for a L&D company that is doing this well? I mean, Rose, if you need all those things, how do you know if you're doing it well?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? The measurement question is a big one. And there's the technical side, and then there's the the more virtuous, we're measuring because we really want improvements and to know what's working and what's not working. On the technical side of it, what you can measure largely depends on the systems you have. A standard LMS is going to track less than if you have a learning record store or if you have something a little bit more robust, right? So there's a technical side of it that does kind of dictate what you can and cannot do. However, in terms of what's possible, almost anything is now. So now I've even worked on ones where it had eye tracking. Where are you gazing?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, very cool. How are you holding your arms? There's one in how to navigate a clean room. So it was actually tracking how people move their arms.
What am I doing with my hands?
Yeah, exactly. Standing in the neutral position, don't touch the canisters, right? But that kind of thing. But the reality is, what is it that you're measuring? And the reality is also make sure you're connecting that to other indicators, right? Data is an indicator. Data doesn't tell you the whole story. It tells you where to look for the story. Right?
I like that. Yeah, very insightful. There's so much here, and I'm sure that we could spend hours just talking about this. But one thing that that Eric, you and I talked about on our meetup in Kansas City just a little bit was not just the impact of serious games on the learner, but how a learner thinks about their organization after going through training like this, and how they feel that not only does the organization care about learners overall, but they care about the individual, and they see that the investment is there for them to succeed. So what do you think that does for an organization overall, as far as retention, as far as loyalty, those type of things?
Yeah. Well, the training you put out, the experiences you put out reflect on your employer brand, right? Like that's the bottom line. Yep. It's part of shaping the experience you have as an employee, and therefore it's part of your employer brand. So I think we need to be really careful that we're upholding brand and culture and heritage when we do these games. So for example, if I did a game for, let's make up a company, Big Liquors, right? That's been around. They've been through all the wars. They went through the Industrial Revolution, whatnot. Like that's heritage, man. Like that's gonna get in there. It's your experiences. They're gonna want to speak to that culturally. But there are others on the opposite end that are like a financial institution that is just gonna be so risk adverse. So what a game looks like when you consider that culture is going to be fundamentally different. So I think it's sort of very, very, very much part of that experience that makes part of your employer brand. So I think there's a lot of care that needs to go into it.
I mean, but I do like the idea of having a moment to reflect at a leadership level or an L&D leadership level within a company to say, are you taking time to ask that question of, what are our goals as far as our kind of employer brand? Who, what the people that work here, and do they feel invested in? And the learning experiences that we're providing, are they, how would we grade ourselves on like how relevant they are? Does it just feel like, we're able to make two roles specifically in terms of things that are empowering to help them do their job, but also from that creative standpoint to say, are people engaged with the learning experiences that we're providing over the course of a year? Is there a spark of, you don't want to say, it's not for entertainment purposes only. So you don't want to say like, oh, great, I can't wait to binge the next e-learning series. The company rolls out. But like, is there ever, are there a few in the course of the year that there's a little bit of spark of a smile of like, oh, that was that one fun thing we did back to review the policies on this, and remember that, and having those little moments of learning experiences sprinkled throughout, that reflects on the overall identity of the organization. It, like you said, it puts a little bit of a message to say, hey, we see you, and we try to create learning experiences that are going to be engaging, and we appreciate you. So I don't know. I think that matters. I don't have like data to support the thesis that those investments are like this make 20% difference, but I don't know. Just as a human being, anecdotally, I think that stuff matters.
Lastly, for our end of the year roundup, we have Ann Campbell, founder of Campbell Training Solutions, from episode 25, Powering the Future, Custom Training Solutions for the Evolving Energy Sector. And in this clip, we discuss how we can design learning solutions for the newest generation coming into the workforce. I kind of want to switch gears just a little bit to the younger generation, Gen Z. So with the growing amount of Gen Z folks that are coming into the workforce, how do you design learning solutions that are geared a little bit more towards them?
I just read a statistic that like 24% of the workforce right now are Gen Zers, and it's going to go up to 30% by 2030. So we really have over a quarter of our workforce soon is going to be Gen Zers. So if we don't start thinking, how do they learn, and how do they like to learn, and how can we make learning impactful for them, we're probably going to be in trouble. This is the first generation that has never not had technology, the World Wide Web, the Internet of Things. Like, they don't know the world like we know without a cell phone or a handheld device or the internet, so they really are a unique generation. And if we don't understand their motivations and their interests and things that drive them or that they're passionate about, I think we are going to be in trouble. And the literature is out there. It's like, here's the millennials and here's Gen Zers, and there is a gap. So how to bridge that gap is really important for us to understand if we want to be successful as learning and development professionals. And they grew up, and if they have a question, where do they go? TikTok, YouTube.
Right to YouTube or Google.
And Google, right. And they don't think to ask somebody or to call somebody like we used to. We used to have to do. So that's their learning. And I think the more we can align ourselves with the way they learn and use their platforms, the more successful we'll be. And they say that their attention span's like 8 seconds. And millennials are supposed to be 12. But I don't agree. I disagree with that a little bit, because really, like, they will listen to 2 to 3 hour podcasts, multitasking, but still, like, if they want to learn about something, they will. So, and they have hyper focus. So I think that we can take that into consideration as well. And things that motivate them are a little different. Like, they want to really align with a brand that aligns with their worldview. And the closer the brand is, the longer they're going to stay. Yeah. I mean, you probably have heard it too. Business owners complain, like, I cannot keep my employees. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And well, some of it is they have that luxury of
of job hopping, and they really want that work-life balance. And the more we can offer that to them, the longer they'll stay probably. But how do we train them? I think really is yet to be discovered and yet to be tried and tested. But I think the closer we can align to how they natively learn, the more successful we'll be. Micro lessons.
Yeah, I would say that I think you're 100% correct on that. Yeah, I think like you said, the more that we align them to a learning process that is much more similar to how they learn, there's less pain points, less frustrations, those type of things, because it just makes more sense in their mind to be like you said, go to TikTok for this, go to YouTube, go to Google, instead of having to slosh their way through a extended amount of point and click type of learning that we're so used to. I would love to. Yeah, I would love to hear maybe some resources that have been influential to your path as an L&D professional, and books and those type of things. And with that, we're signing off for now. I can't wait to be back with y'all next year to discuss more exciting insights and stories from leaders within the industry. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, The Buzz, to keep up with all things L&D. Happy holidays, everyone, and I'll see you next time.